Long before there was a Black Lives Matter movement, there was a movement for Black lives.
It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you.
BLM from its beginning was the continuation of a tradition and a remix of a much longer Black freedom struggle, but it has its roots in the labor of Black women.
After Zimmerman's acquittal, activist Alicia Garza posted on Facebook, "Black people, I love you. I love us. Our lives matter. Black lives matter." Garza's friend Patrice Couleur shared the final 3 words as a hashtag. On the 7th of March 2013, Black Lives Matter was first seen on Twitter. Writer and immigrant rights activist Opal Tometi offered to build social media platforms for it, where activists could connect with one another.
With this hashtag, new conversations were being created online and ultimately in our everyday lives.
Black Lives Matter is our call to action. It is a tool to reimagine a world where Black people are free to exist, free to live. It is a tool for our allies to show up differently for us.
Breonna Taylor was fatally shot by police in her own apartment in Louisville, Kentucky. No one was immediately arrested. In June, the FBI reopened an investigation. Breonna Taylor was an emergency room technician, yet her killing slipped largely under the radar as COVID-19 swept the US, disproportionately affecting communities of color.
I and many Black Americans are at higher risk for COVID.
Coronavirus is killing more African Americans.
African Americans bear the brunt of the economic downturn brought on by the coronavirus.
In Minneapolis, Minnesota, 46-year-old George Floyd was victim to these conditions. He'd lost his restaurant job and tested positive for COVID-19. Suspecting Floyd of using a forged $20 bill, police officer Derek Chauvin held his knee on his neck for several minutes. The world watched and started speaking out.
No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace!
Certainly, with 40 million people unemployed, 100,000 Americans dead, a white nationalist in office, and then a televised public lynching, those are certainly the perfect conditions for the emergence of rebellion.
All 4 police officers involved in Floyd's killing were arrested on murder charges, brought about by that video, but also in part by the strength of Black Lives Matter protests across America and the world.
People of all backgrounds, genders, and races have come together to demand change. Honor them, honor George, and make the necessary changes that make law enforcement the solution.
In the run-up to Floyd's death, President Trump's critics have pointed to his dismantling of the steps Obama took to tackle racist policing, consent decrees, limiting military-grade weapons, expanding investigations into police units accused of abuses, have all been overturned under President Trump. Some campaigners are arguing for those measures to be reinstated and enforcing policies like banning chokeholds and better de-escalation training. Countries around the world are now working out what Black Lives Matter means to them, and campaigners hope that the year 2020 will be the last time they'll need to have protests like this again.
The Black Lives Matter movement wants a world free of anti-blackness. Since the death of George Floyd, protesters in the US have called for an end to police brutality towards black people. But what does the Black Lives Matter movement in the UK want? Is it to provide solidarity, to change attitudes? Does the movement want specific changes in our police forces, in our schools, and in our government? Here are the views of some of those involved.
Our purpose for attending the protest was to raise the consciousness of our communities, raise the consciousness of the people that came out, to say that we have our own George Floyds in this country, and these are people that have been experiencing death by the hand of the police. And also we wanted to highlight people that have been killed in prisons and detention centres more broadly. The enforcers of the law, why are they above the law? why does it seem that the law doesn't apply to them? And why is the British public unwilling to convict police officers when it is clear that they have acted outside of the law in a way that if a member of the public, if anybody else was to carry out an action in such a way, they would be held accountable?
What we want is equality. What we want is justice. And what we want is to have our opportunities, the same opportunities that happen for everybody around.
Easy wins to make life easier for the government would be, for example, a full public inquiry into the disproportionate number of black and minority ethnic persons that have died in the COVID pandemic to date. A ban on tasers would cost the government nothing. Also, that's been rolled out. A bit of kit to all the police forces in the country. That should be unrolled. After the easy wins, we have the harder things to do, perhaps, because it speaks to the unequal nature of society, full stop, regardless of race. But the uprooting of the institutional racism that we see in the National Health Service, which is part of the story about why there's so many disproportionate family deaths in the health service, in the education service, in the civil service, and of course we can get onto employment more generally.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
The reason why we want you to stand with us as Black Lives Matter is because people don't feel that our lives matter.
It's just equality that we want. We just want to be equal. We don't want to be treated differently.
The racism in this country is brutal. It is overt. It's very plain to see. And if people cannot see it, then they've simply buried their head in the sand. Because it's really important that we actually invest in services, invest within communities, invest in mental health care, invest in opportunities, the things that are actually proven to increase people's safety. And I think only a truth and reconciliation process would actually start to address it when we're actually willing to have an open dialogue about it. And if we can't even teach the adequate history in schools about the colonial and, racist legacy of this country, then we've got a very long way to go.
Much of the chat over recent decades has been about integrating the real history of Britain into the curriculum, of which there's obviously a black facet, which at the moment is not included in our curriculum, other than good teachers once a year on Black History Month, talking about Martin Luther King and maybe Seacole, the nurse. But we really need it to be integrated properly so that the full history of the British Empire is told.
History at school has been taught as if something that happened a very long time ago and it's something that we can't really change. And, the British Empire, they were great. They were fantastic. Look at all these amazing things they've done for these countries. And then I come home and, my parents tell me the truth and I'm like, oh, wow, okay. But the other kids, the other white kids at school will never learn this and will never know this. So they're the ones who grow up to be the judges, they're the ones who grow up to be the lawyers, and they're the ones who make the important decisions for us black people, where we can't actually do that ourselves within society. So it actually goes into educating the children right from the get-go of what is right and what is wrong.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
When we say I can't breathe, we're not just talking quite literally in the terms of what actually happened to George Floyd and others. We're saying that society at this moment in time is suffocating us because it's with every angle of inequity and inequality that we face, it is making it difficult for us to live. And it's not just about wanting to exist in this society. We want to thrive in this society. We want to be able to move forward with our lives and progress without having to always, every single day, experience racism in all its forms.
Success would look like it being on the grass level, white people looking and actually going out to educate themselves in what the problem and the issue is. It's all good and well saying, we're not as bad as the US, so get over it. It's actually going out and finding out what the problems we're speaking about are and actually trying to find real solutions within the workplace, within the medical field, and within police brutalities.
There are so many resources that people can look to educate themselves, not just about the colonial legacy, but actually about what grassroots groups and communities want and need at this time. So it's not that these resources or education do not exist, they definitely do. And I think it's about people taking the steps to educate and inform themselves.
On a higher level with the government, that needs to change with representation that we have there. I mean, it's all good and well with statistics coming out. Yeah, we're having more black people in there. We're having more women of colour in Parliament. But I'm going to be honest, we need more. We need these conversations to be had, and we need to be represented within these conversations.
How is everyone today? My name is Michael Danzel, and I know we're doing the social distance thing, so I hope and pray that you are attentive as you've been. I really appreciate you making the time to be here with us, particularly on the sanctuary, for finding the courage in the heart to do something that's not popular right now, to do something that very few of us would have done, and it's something